Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us today for a very important and informative conversation around why you need your CMMC certifications now and how to have them in time. My name is Omar Zarabi, President and CEO of Port53. In the last several months, we here at Port53 have worked diligently to create a one-stop shop for organizations that need to comply to CMMC. And we're extremely excited to present our approach to helping organizations prepare and stay ahead of third-party audits that are going to be coming down the pipeline soon. Today's conversation will be led by myself. I'll be joined by Mr. Rich Moore, who is the CEO of Cyber6, as well as part of the Cyber Innovation Center. I'll also be joined by Mr. Chad Boatman, who's the CEO of TrustMAPP, a leader in cybersecurity performance management, and one of our valued partners. Throughout the conversation, we kindly ask that everyone stay on mute. There is a chat room that will be moderated by Mr. Joseph Carden, board member of TrustMAPP. So if any questions arise, please feel free to chat it over there. We will also have about 10 to 15 minutes at the end of the webinar for a Q&A session. So just a quick overview of the agenda. As I mentioned, it is a very informative call today. We'll spend the first 30 seconds to a minute introducing Port53 and TrustMAPP, and then we'll pass it over and really discuss why CMMC, give a brief history of CMMC, discuss the rollout timetable, the most up-to-date rollout timetable. Then we'll have Mr. Moore take a deeper dive into the CMMC, walk us through the different levels and the different components at each level, discuss the implications of the CMMC, the audit process, as well as the cost of not being compliant to CMMC once this really goes into effect. From there, we'll discuss our approach here at Port53 and really helping organizations assess, plan, reassess, and really deploy the proper solutions and the proper resources to get to the level that they are aspiring to. We'll do a quick little demo of the TrustMAPP Dashboard and the CMMC platform that we've created, and then we'll discuss the steps that you can take today to get started on this journey. So this is a quick overview. Port53 has been around since 2016, focused on leveraging the power and elasticity of the cloud to really help organizations in attaining an enterprise-grade big data level of protection. We leverage the cloud as a delivery mechanism because it is consumed at a per-use model. So whether you're a 5-person organization or a 5,000-person organization, we're able to deliver the same level of protection and that same level of integration. Over the last 4 years, we've worked with thousands of organizations across the nation. And throughout that time, it became really clear that a big challenge in cybersecurity is the way that companies approached it tended to be more reactive by nature or more ad hoc. So here at Port53, we work with organizations to really help them in implementing a security roadmap that aligns with their organization's digital and technological goals. With that in mind, I'm extremely excited about our new partnership with TrustMAPP, a leader in the cybersecurity performance management space. And to give you an overview of TrustMAPP and to kick off our conversation around the CMMC, I'd like to pass it over to the CEO of TrustMAPP, Mr. Chad Boatman. Chad?
Thank you, Omar. Appreciate that introduction. And welcome everybody to the webinar. Very excited to have this webinar with Port53. TrustMAPP and Port53 have established a new partnership, as Omar described. And we created TrustMAPP to really focus on the continuous improvement lifecycle of cybersecurity. And with TrustMAPP, organizations can finally automate their measurement, the reporting, and most importantly, the planning and the remediation that is a result of the identifying those gaps from an assessment. And in this webinar today, we'll briefly show some pieces of TrustMAPP that are supporting the CMMC lifecycle. As you'll learn, or if you do not already know, CMMC is really focused on that continuous improvement and maintaining a specific level of maturity against the control set that is required. We began TrustMAPP and launched the first version of TrustMAPP in the market, actually all the way back in the middle of 2015. Today, we have version 4 of the product. It's a SaaS-based solution in a highly secured cloud environment. And we're delivering this platform actually all over the world to customers and partners combined. So with that, we can go on to the next slide. So why CMMC and why now? And I think really, if we take a look at Katie Arrington and her quote here in the blue circle to the right of the slide, really highlights exactly why CMMC has come about and become a very important topic for the DoD and securing cyberspace. And as a result, if we go back in history a little bit, which we'll talk to in a moment, we've had a number of different standards being released, executive orders, and so on. Some of you hopefully have conducted some self-assessment around 800-171. And CMMC is really designed to further enhance the cybersecurity of subcontractors to primes, prime contractors of the DoD, and further secure that supply chain. And so with CMMC, we'll emphasize in this discussion the importance of continuous improvement and continuing to manage as such. So if we see this brief history, we start with FIPS 200. And FIPS 200 is really a standard, if you will, that was released to address the security of information and communications technology within the supply chain. If we look forward to 2005, NIST 853 having been released, and this is a very robust control framework, primarily adopted by government agencies, at least initially. Now that framework has evolved over time. We're on Rev 4. I believe there's a Rev 5 in draft, and other private industries are beginning to adopt this as well. Then we have the Executive Order 13556 that came out in 2010, specifically around DFARS. And then we are looking at 800-171, which hopefully most of you are familiar with by now, which 171 is really I like to liken it to a lightweight version of 853, designed to meet some minimum requirements around the cybersecurity of systems. And then we reached this 2019 timeframe where Executive Order 13873 has been released, signed by Donald Trump, and was really the genesis of establishing the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification Program, which we're here to talk about today, released this year. So if we look at the CMMC rollout timetable, we note that CMMC 1.0 has been released beginning of the year in January. A slight revision was added to that, more clarification in March. And then this spring, a board was formed to formalize training of the assessors and the certifiers in context of CMMC directly. And then we have this month, can't believe it's June already. In June, we'll begin to see RFIs containing the maturity levels defined within CMMC, maturity levels 1 through 5. And in September, those RFPs will be released, and suppliers, subcontractors, primes will be required to comply with the CMMC requirements in order to bid on those RFPs and win that business in the future for DoD contracts. And then finally in November is the work that the AB is doing to formalize training of these certifiers will be rolled out, and certifying entities will be visiting subcontractors and primes to determine if they truly are at the level of attestation that they have self-assessed against. And so we're here to help hopefully provide clarity today in this discussion and show you on how this process can be made much easier. Pass it over to you, Rich.
Oh, thank you. Hi, everybody. Rich Moore, CEO of Cyber6 and a user of TrustMAPP, and also, someone of a small to mid-sized business that does government procurement. So this is important to me as well as to my clients that I do CISO services for. The interesting part, we've got to think of CMMC as well, especially for those of you that have been in for a long time. Is when we had those old cage code auditors that would come in and assess how we're performing against our contracts and how well we're doing for software engineering, et cetera. So the CMMC is really, we got to think about it as a procurement gate for allowing contractors to bid on, win, or participate in certain contracts. Those contracts or RFIs or RFPs that you've heard mentioned previously will specify within those what level are required for each type of contract, and obviously those will be pushed down to subcontractors. The most interesting part of CMMC, as you heard, it is a combination of many controls, many frameworks being introduced to each other. When we think about the FARs, which is the Federal Acquisition Regulations, we've got NIST 171, we've got 171B, we've got 800-53, we've got the CERT Resiliency Management Model, we've got ISO for our policies, we've got the Cybersecurity Framework, we've got the Critical Security Controls, and of course the Secure Control Frameworks. All of these things were taken into discussion as they were building out this CMMC model. And so when we think about these controls, and we'll break them down just a little bit, they're really going to fall under how you operate yourself, meaning, what's your system security plans for each system that you have? How are you going to assess those? What are your plan of actions and milestones? And of course, what are your policy standards and procedures? And they very articulate those as being different sets of documents and not one combined document. So that's something to take away from today as well. The other piece, when we're thinking about this third-party assessment organization, they're going to be coming in and looking at, how do we comply with 171, 171B, as well as the DFARS regulations. And each of those are broken down into the level 1, level 2, level 3, 4, and 5, et cetera. And so as we think about level 1, as it says, these are the basic controls. This really falls under FARS, which is the Federal Acquisition Regulation 52.204 through 21. And again, even though these are some controls, the CMC spreads it out over the 17 different controls. Why? Probably due to a high level of nature requirements inside the FARS. And again, it's subject to interpretation. So as we're thinking about dealing with these third-party assessment organizations, there's going to be some subjective interpretation of these controls. And so we must be able to articulate those. And of course, TrustMAPP is a great platform to help you get those done and over with. When we think about that 17 controls of level 1, that's pretty much where everybody is today, especially if you've already done your system security plans, you've already got plans of actions, you've already sort of self-certified yourself as NIST 171. Level 2 is really where we come into covering the CUI controls. This is the right step. It covers 59% of the 171 CUI controls. So that's an interesting number, 59%. So it kind of gets us to the right step. It begins to focus on how do we protect CUI information, but it doesn't really give us a level of assessment that we haven't been doing already. Level 3 is where we're now getting into 100% of the CMMC controls. This is the coverage of the 171 plus an additional 20 controls that are taken from the non-800-71. And some of those areas are, talking about how do we handle it? What's your audit logs? Do you use encrypted sessions? How do you do DNS filtering? How do you employ spam protection? Do you use asymmetric cryptography? All of these things are going to be part of the other 20 controls inside of level 3. This is probably where the majority of contracts will be written, in my opinion. And doesn't not sure how that will be pushed down to subcontractors, depending on their size. I'm hoping that subcontractors as big as I am are probably in the level 2 or level 1, at least as we get kicked off here. Level 4 and 5 is really interesting, especially when I think of the larger primes out there. This is going to be 156 controls. And level 5 is going to have 171, as you can read. And these numbers exceed the regular 110 controls that we have to have for CUI and that are found in the 871. And so where do they grab these other documentations from, these other controls? As I mentioned, you've got the CERT RMM, you've got the NIST 800-53, you've got the 171B, and you've got the critical information security controls. And of course, you got to do all your DFAS and DFARS regulations as well within there. So each of these are progressing on top of each other. You can't get to a level 5 without going through level 1 through 4. Another thing to note as we move off this page, you can go ahead, is the implication for contractors, right? So what happens if I don't meet the level of requirement for the contract? Well, if you don't meet it, you probably won't have a chance to bid on it. Which means that you've put yourself out of contention for a period of time, most likely, until they can get another third-party organization in to refine you. Your certification levels, again, the contractor will be required to meet the appropriate levels. They really haven't said how long you have to keep them. Well, it'll be an annual, a semi-annual review, or every other year. I'm assuming depending on the size of the third-party organizations and how often they can do these will be dependent inside the RFI or RFP, how many times you've got to certify yourself. As many of you know, most of the 171 is annual already. Follow that, but we're not too sure yet. Subcontractors, again, it'll be the possibility that the subcontractors apply and meet the standard as pushed down through them. And of course, we're talking about appropriate tiers. What do those mean? Who should be at a 5, who should be at a 4, etc. And then the allowable cost. So this is where, of course, third-party organizations are going to be charging, by platform, by, individuals, by company. And so there's going to be a flexibility ranges that will hopefully be valuable to organizations to leverage. And then, of course, as we're here today, is how do I keep track of this? How do I know to get my data into the third parties so they can have a single repository? How can I keep track of what I'm missing? And of course, now we get into the SSPs, the POEMs, and the PSPs, right? We need to continue to maintain these. And so what happens if we don't maintain? Well, you probably know that there is a requirement for non-compliance, and that follows under our False Claims Act. So as you're under a False Claims Act, that's definitely where you don't want to be. That puts you in suspension for a period of time. It can really hurt your business. So again, I appreciate the time today. I know we're really trying to move fast here, but hopefully if you've got questions, we'll be able to answer it. And I turn it back over to you, Chad, from TrustMAPP, and Omar from 53. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moore. And Rich will be with us for the Q&A session. So if there are any specific questions around what he covered, we'll definitely have an opportunity to ask those. So as Rich mentioned, an important part of this CMMC compared to previous compliance regulations has to do with continuous improvements of your cybersecurity posture. We understand that bad actors and attacks are constantly evolving. So a big purpose of the CMMC is to make sure that your cybersecurity posture internally is doing the same. So our process here with our partnership with TrustMAPP falls under 4 buckets. First off, initially assessing and benchmarking where you are today, really assessing and figuring out where your gaps are, deciding on what you do and what to implement to get to the state and the level that you'd like to get to. We'll work with you in deploying and integrating the solutions as well as providing the resources that you need that you don't have internally, and then leveraging the TrustMAPP platform to continuously and constantly measure and reassess and track that continuously. So With that in mind, I'd like to pass it over to Chad one more time, and we could go ahead and dive into the dashboard. Really excited to show you the TrustMAPP platform over here.
Thank you, Omar. Appreciate it.
Stop sharing.
Okay. Everybody, Omar, are you able to see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Okay, so what we've done in TrustMAPP is we've set up two types of assessments, what we call CMMC practices and CMMC processes. And I'm going to just briefly show you what the interface looks like in TrustMAPP if we were to take one of these assessments. So if I go into one of my assessments, we have a group A and a group B, and we have a description of what each one represents. Where such as group A is set up to represent up to a maturity level of at least a 2. So if we go into our assessment example here, we can see the requirements that we must respond to. And I have one that I have still open here. We look at media protection as an example. And we have the media protection control. So I can open up that drawer and I can always hover over, get a definition of what this means, and further instructions, and then select an option that perhaps matches my environment. And by answering that, it brings me to the next one, which I've already completed, but we can see the answer I selected, it's documented. And so this is one example of an assessment interface for CMMC. And if I go ahead and move back to my assessments here, we'll go ahead and dig into some of the reporting so you all can see what some of the analytics will look like. We have what we call an assessment dashboard. You notice that we had a group A and a group B. I did not respond to anything in group B. As such, my group B is grayed out. And group A, I can quickly identify through this dashboard exactly where the areas that might be performing well and meeting the expectations, and those areas where perhaps I am underperforming, such as audit and accountability. From this point forward, we also can drill down into specific areas by such as looking at Group A and identifying where within Group A do we need to specifically focus. And in this example, access controls at the top, and we have some instructions here to help us identify how do we go from a level 2 maturity to a level 4, if that indeed is the requirement upon our organization, as Rich was describing those levels of maturity. Now in TrustMAPP, I want to point out that through this interface and using the CMMC templates, we have pre-populated recommendations, and the recommendations are scaled to the organization size. So you're going to be able to get an understanding of what the level of effort is to make improvements based on your current maturity level in a given area, and what that ongoing effort looks like, and any relevant capital costs in these cases. And so we always will get those instructions. We also will have the ability to create tasks and track that continuous improvement. So we can begin to look at who is working on what activities and what timeline are we going to be completing those activities within. And so from here, we can create a task, say assign it to a user called Darren Demo. We'll start that task today, and perhaps that person's going to work on it for about 2 hours a week. And if I were to save this task at the bottom, and what it's going to do is populate that task on my calendar. So I have this Gantt chart that we start developing for every task we've created. And as we add more tasks, our Gantt chart will be populated, and we can begin to continually manage and establish accountability and transparency across various team members that have a stake in the overall CMMC compliance and our overall cybersecurity posture. All right, Omar, I'll go ahead and pass on the controls back over to you.
Chad, just one area, can you discuss how to manage subcontractors and suppliers through and you know, their level of maturity with their in terms of CMMC in this dashboard?
Absolutely. So in TrustMAPP, we have a ability to manage what we might call multi-tenancy here. And we have this concept of regions. So we can establish a region. In this case, we have, as you can see, an example subcontractor maturity dashboard. So I can assess each one of my subcontractors individually and roll it up so we can understand what our supplier ecosystem might look like if I perhaps were the prime contractor on an engagement. And in this case, that rolled up score is a 2.68 across all of our regions that we've established.
Beautiful.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Go ahead and share my screen one more time. Awesome. So with the TrustMAPP platform, our aim is to constantly assess, benchmark where you are today, and then help you with that gap analysis and filling those gaps to get you to where you want to be. Now, we understand that every organization's size and internal cybersecurity maturity is different. So, we want to be that one-stop shop to help you with everything that you need, whether it's having a full-time virtual CISO, or whether it's just leveraging us, in helping you with implementing the solutions and procuring the solutions. We've partnered with proven, established enterprise-grade vendors. And as you all saw earlier, we were Cisco's #1 cloud security partner. So in terms of how to get started today, this is basically our offering with the package. Obviously, the dashboard itself has a lot of value, but we over here at Port53 have our full professional services team ready to assist you in really assessing, first off, with this $10,000 phase 1 package, assessing against level 1, making sure that your organization has all the controls in place, and then giving you the ability via the TrustMAPP dashboard to self-attest to level 2. From there, we'll go ahead and engage with you. And like I mentioned, based off of your organization size, based off of your internal sophistication of your cybersecurity program and the maturity of where it's at today, we'll be able to engage with you to help you in getting to the level that your organization needs to get to. So I think that's about it for us over here. And I know there has been a few questions that have been posed in the chat room. From my conversations with customers, I know there are a lot of questions and there's a level of confusion around the CMMC. So what I'd like to do for the next 10 to 15 minutes is just open up the floor to a conversation, as we do have Mr. Joseph Cardin as well as Mr. Rich Moore. Let's just open it up to a conversation here.
Hey, Rich. So somebody posted a question here in regards, will a company have to be CMMC compliant in its entirety, or will there be sections that might be level 3 or level 1? From my understanding is, if you're level 1, you have to be level 1 across the board. And if you're a level 3, you have to be a level 3 across the board. Is that correct in saying that?
So let's back up a little bit and talk about the right language here. So complying with CMC does not make you 171 compliant. CMMC is merely a third-party validation check to see if the basic levels of compliance are being done as part of the contracting process. So you're still going to have to do the 171, your DFARS, your NFO controls, etc., for 171 compliant, which you are required to do. CMMC is going to be that third-party validation check, and it's also, as I mentioned earlier, subjective. And so the good thing about TrustMAPP and using something like it gives you the ability to see where you're doing very well on your controls and where you need additional help. And therefore, you can have an argument or a good conversation with your regulators in saying, yeah, we are level 3. We may have to do some additional work here. Here's my, what they call planning and actions and milestones meeting. So while we all know level 1 or level 2 across the board is the legal language, we all know that it's subjective and that we should be able to have conversations with our regulators to be able to say, yes, we are level 2. we're deficient maybe in these two areas. Here's my plan of actions and milestones. It meets exactly what I have to do for 171 compliance. And I know that's a long-winded conversation, but I just want to reiterate CMC is not going to make you compliant with 171. You're still going to have to do that. This is the third-party validation check.
Got it. Excellent.
Hopefully that's too much.
Yeah. And then the other question was, how do we use TrustMAPP to track those separate areas of the company and certifications? And
I think Chad showed that, so I'll turn it over to Chad.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. So the way that an organization can manage their scope essentially is by defining exactly those areas within the organization, whether they be operating units, various divisions, however that is defined internally with your company. Those can be defined as two separate things. The first is regions. So we spoke a little bit about that. A region is a way to scope a portion of what you are measuring. So instead of trying to, eat the entire elephant, maybe we just want to look at the leg as an example, using that analogy. And we can then define if product A is being managed as part of a level 3 maturity, but then product B and C only need to meet level 2 maturity according to CMMC. Each one of those products can be actually defined as a separate region, and we can assign a separate assessment to them as well. And not to confuse matters, but we also don't need to use regions. We can even simply create different assessments for different parts of our organization as well. Regions are really defined to help organizations that have a number of assessments with various product sets or geographical regions to make that view more simple. And so there's a couple of ways to handle scoping depending on the complexity of your environment and how many different components of your assessment that have some variables that you need to call out separately.
So there's one more question here from Danny R. What industries have you worked with to implement requirements in regards to specific? I assume he means generally in regards to frameworks. So I don't know if you want to discuss that, Chad.
Yeah, so in TrustMAPP, we have over 50 different assessment frameworks and regulations that we support. We actually created this platform before CMMC was a thought in the industry, supporting ISO and NIST 853, NIST CSF, PCI, HIPAA, you name it. There's a number of privacy regulations actually as well, CCPA, GDPR to name two. And in terms of industry, as you can imagine, based on the number of different regulations and frameworks that we have in TrustMAPP, TrustMAPP is really designed to support multiple industries, including financial services, healthcare, manufacturing, technology organizations, business services, and of course, Port53 being the partner that we've chosen as well as part of these engagements.
And Joe and Rich, I think there's another question just around the timelines. So Greg asked, in another webinar, we were told nothing definitive will go into effect until January of 2021. Can we touch on that a little bit and the importance of why it's important to take action today?
Yeah, well, the last known comment was July 1st. July 1st, 2020, CMMC will be enforced, was the last comment from Katie Arrington. So just because they're taking whether they're taking their time or they're challenged with time of getting auditors prepared for November to start doing audits for firms, it doesn't mean that you should wait. And I think it really comes down to, you probably won't know, and Rich can probably answer this better, but you probably won't know even what your certification level is. So what Rich was stating, if you are a government contractor, you must at least first self-attesting to 171 and DFARS immediately if you already haven't. And that will at least start you getting prepared for CMMC.
Yep, I think that's spot on. I have 2 customers at the moment. We've got a July 31st deadline for a few of our DFARS regulations. We are pushing towards CMMC with the help of TrustMAPP. So again, thinking about how to use the platform appropriately, it's getting us ready. It's not a whole lot of effort, especially if you've been already doing it. It's just a matter of documenting it, preparing it for the third-party organizations to come in and review it. And again, waiting for those third parties to get certified through the advisory board. So, yeah, hurry up and wait, which is always a classic case for government work, right?
Chad, I know, a big difference with the CMMC has to do with the concept of practices versus processes and how that's sort of newer with the CMMC compared to most other previous regulations. Can we touch a little bit on that as well? Rich, I don't know if you want to take that question.
Yeah, could you rephrase that question? I apologize.
Really clarifying the differences between practices and processes of the CMMC.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's a good one. So as you can imagine, practices and processes are going to be, we all talk about people, process, and organizational work or technology, right? So when we think about procedures, those are going to have to be documented steps, right? So when I think about procedures, they are documented steps. You're not, everybody talks about tribal knowledge, we're doing it, this is the way we've always done it, etc. The CMMC is going to require you to have it documented. That's going to probably be the hardest piece around what we're calling the procedural part. The other parts are just basically the controls. How am I answering the controls? Is it going to be test of design, test of operating effectiveness, or is it going to be just subjective by the auditors? That has not been determined. But in my career doing a lot of FISMAs and a lot of other type of activities, it's either black or white. There's really no gray areas. And so I would stay along those lines of it has to be documented. And I know I didn't really answer that question about a practice and a procedure too much, but I don't want to get into that level of sophistication. What you're really going to have to be talking about is your controls and how you answer those effectively and how you document them.
Yeah. Okay. I think there was somebody wanted some more clarification around authorized certifiers and a definitive process. So the certifiers start in November. That's that's the latest date that we were told. And what is the definitive process? We still don't know what the definitive process is because they haven't stated that. Because their official kickoff is July 1st, 2020, I have a feeling July 1st is when we're going to see a definitive process. Is that safe in saying that, Rich?
He's nodding his head, so.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So before we wrap up, are there any other final questions in regards to the CMMC or the timetable or anything else that we could address?
Yeah, Omar, let me just, I didn't really particularly answer that person's question about processes, practices, and capabilities. So I just want to give a good example. So a capability must include a practice and a process, right? So for example, if I have a capability, I might name that capability C001, right? I have a practice, which is a numbering of the methodology as well. So I may say C001 I've got a 2-letter domain where the domain could be access control. The number might be the CMC level that I need to comply with. And the next number might be the type of practice. So for example, I may say AC 1.0001, limit information system access, etc. That is the breakdown of from a domain to a process to a capability to a practice. So I hopefully that answered that individual's question of more detail about a practice compared to a process, right?
Well said. Awesome. So if there are no further questions, just to wrap up over here, everyone will receive a recording of this webinar as well as a copy of the slide deck. In the follow-up email, there will be an opportunity to schedule a 30-minute scoping call with us to, like I mentioned, if you have not gotten started on this process, that initial phase 1 is just to self-attest to level 1 and help you in starting your journey towards level 2. And then based off of your organization and really where you want to be, that scoping call will determine the level of engagement from our end, as well as where ideally you as an organization will strive for across the different levels. So if there aren't any other further questions, thank you everyone for taking the time to join us, and please keep an eye out from that email here in the next 5 to 10 minutes. Thank you everyone.
Thanks.